And it is Saturday night, and we're back. So it's been an exciting week. We've had a lot going on in the news cycle and what's going on. And tonight we had Benny Benito. You were a candidate for Congress?
Congress in the 29th Congressional District, Northeast San Fernando Valley.
Wow. And then we have, of course, Don on the mic over here.
Hey, everybody.
So you're not a candidate. We can have you on the air now. There's no problems. And, Don and I were talking about what shifted from the last election cycle to this election cycle. Things changed.
Absolutely.
We looked at California and the map just got bright red. So from a California perspective, you're in the San Fernando Valley. You've been a union rep. You're now retired, so we can talk about that.
He's been a Democrat.
That's right. You were a Democrat.
He's been an independent.
Yeah, not only was I a Democrat, but I was a strategist and organizer for the Latino Democratic Party. I helped build the Latino political machine some 25 years ago, which now, you have Senator Alex Padilla, Congressman Tony Cardenas, and the whole machine that pretty much turned their back on our community, And
your community being the Hispanic community?
No. I just mean the entire 29th Congressional District. But yes, it's a majority Hispanic. But for me, it's never been about race. Our district is our district.
That's why I wanted to clear that up, because I wanted to see what the R is.
I think Jeffrey was part of that district for a long time.
Well, yeah. Well, it's like the Chicano movement. People talk about the Chicano movement. People always think about, okay, you got to be brown skin. No, that's not true. Because there was a lot of people that were involved with the Chicano movement that called themselves Chicanos that were white.
You just gotta have a lowrider.
Yeah. You have to have the lowrider, brother. Whether it be a bike or a skateboard or whatever it may be, but you got to have something. But no, going back to the introduction. So also I was elected. Yes, I was a union steward, labor management rep for SCIU Local 99, a very powerful union that represents classified employees throughout major school districts, including Los Angeles Unified School District. And then I was elected by the rank and file to represent them as their vice.
Rank and file being
the workers, the members, all the members, and they wanted me to run to be their vice president because there was so much corruption, and part of the corruption was something that I exposed when I got elected. I'll get into that after. Remind me about that. But
the corruption, we'll put that on the back burner. We'll come back to it.
But the reason why a lot of them were supporting me was because when I got elected, they said, "Hey, Benny, there was a lot of Republicans," and back then I was staunch conservative Democrat. But
so let's talk about that for 1 second, because that's kind of shifted. So when you say staunch Democrat, what were your values as a staunch Democrat?
Well, the values for that have been down through generation through generation.
20 years.
Yeah, we're going back 25 years. And probably even a little bit more than that. But it's the values that were handed down through generations. Number one, God, family, and country.
Okay.
Our parents always taught us. When you come to this country in America, many of these individuals were migrants, so on and so forth, immigrated into the United States. Many of us were born here in the United States, but it was never about being a part of this system, being a part of the country with your hands out, asking the government to give you. Our parents always taught us, like my father, the roof over your head, the clothes on your back, the food on your table is always going to come from your hard sweat. So they taught us how hard work. And as an example, every day after, my dad would wait till the last day of school. If there wasn't a playoff game or for the baseballs or whatever, it'd be the last day of our championship game, right? And then we would load up the truck, the station wagon or the camioneta, and we go to Stockton, Lodi, and Modesto. This is at age 6, picking cucumbers, in Stockton, Lodi, and Modesto, learning how to work, learning the way the system. As a child,
So you spent your summers in the fields working.
Yes. And that was part of what we did because, we were always taught this is, you want to learn how to be a hard worker, but we always had God first. God was always the center of everything that we did. And when it comes to, and we're not just talking about Hispanics, but you're talking a lot of the minorities, and this goes across the board. It's not even just about race. It's our children. Our children are something that is the most, I guess, it's a line you do not cross. You always say.
What do you mean by that?
That means leave our kids alone. When you talk about all this indoctrinating that's going on in the schools, when you talk about what shifted, the shift was that, okay, they first started saying, we're going to pull God out of the picture. We're going to pull the Bibles out of the hotels. Okay, people are like, whatever. But once they started indoctrinating our children, confusing our children to the point where many of them are now hurting themselves, most people weren't aware of it. So this past election over the past 2.5 years, with PERC and other organizations, Leave Our Kids Alone, with LOCA, with Lucine and Manuk, was to wake up the communities, to wake up the parents so they know what's going on in the schools. That's what really shifted.
And that's what got like the Armenian community kind of going.
Yeah.
Got them riled up. They didn't even know that there was there were organizations within the valley that were already organized, that already had a force behind them, and and it just got that much more organized.
Yeah.
With the other folks that are all throughout the valley, Glendale, Burbank.
Well, what they're lacking is what all of us were always lacking, especially conservatives. You get no media, you get no coverage. So we had to figure out a way.
Well, you get media. You get
Yeah, well,
media. You still
now-
get the media you want.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So
and
that's
then,
what we
and then
did.
when 1,000 people show up, they say, like 50 people out here.
Yeah. No, and they got the story all twisted up.
Let's back up a second because you jumped through 25 years.
Yes.
So in that 25 years, because this is a lot of conversations that I've had. We've had Democrats on our show. I mean, that was part of the reason why I wanted the shows. I wanted to be able to have people on our radio show that face both sides, because there's, we just got Hockman, who's now going to be our new.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to be our new DA, and he was a Democrat, I think. Then he was a
yes.
Republican, a Democrat, an independent. I think he had, and maybe he might have just been Republican independent. I'm not really sure now. But we have a lot of people that did get elected that were more conservative, but still in the independent. I think we got more independents elected this time around too. So when you talk about 25 years ago, how you have immigrants that came here. There were a lot of people in the 80s that came here. They had special visas. They'd come in, they'd work for the summer. They'd pick our fruits and vegetables, and they wanted to go back to the countries they came from. And now there was this shift in the Democratic Party predominantly to open our borders and have a lot of people just come in haphazardly. We don't know who they are. What transpired in 25 years in that the people that said, no, we don't want to be here permanently, now all of a sudden you made a comment about there was no such thing as a handout, and now the Democratic Party seems to be the handout party. I don't want to offend people that are Democratic, because I don't think everybody.
I don't even think it's a Democratic issue.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I think that the issue is that you had certain values that were just inherited by our grandparents, our great grandparents. And that was, above all, truth. Truth was like the highest form of, what's honorable, right?
Your word is your word.
Your word is your word.
Exactly.
And gosh, look what they've done to the English language. They've destroyed it. And then, it's like when you've coached Little League baseball and other sports. It's all, you don't get all the strikes, right? You don't get all the... But you know what? There's a system in place, and we trust this system, and it's a fair system, and all this other. We don't have that today. Now what we have is a board that gets picked, and they're the ones that pick the winners and losers. It's not about what's actually fair or what's actually true. And they go through all this gymnastics of language to make you feel like you're the evil bigot, that you're in the wrong. And so, I've watched Benny go through so many battles with so many different levels in government and through the union and all this other stuff. So,
but what changed in the Democratic Party that caused you?
You talked
to
about the
decide?
shift. So the shift
where's the shift?
But
here's.
I mean, the shift also because you went from being a staunch Democrat to being a staunch Republican. And then you kind of went to the independent side there for a little bit.
5 issues. No, I never became an independent. No,
Okay.
I was thinking of becoming an independent because I didn't want to be affiliated with any party. I wanted to just be about the issues and keep it just at that. But at the same time, I wanted people to know that Republicans aren't the enemy. Of course, we have some problems with the leadership. That needs to change as well. But, that wasn't the issue, But the shift was that it's 5 issues. When we built the whole Latino political machine some 25 years ago, 5 issues that we're going to deal with: the gang violence, the teenage dropout, the teenage pregnancies, illegal migration, and the abuse in the welfare system. So what happened was, after we built these machines, we got people elected to every level of government. They found ways to make money off of it. So when I became aware of the fact that they were allowing our kids to keep killing each other, allowing our young girls and our young boys to drop out of school because now they're going to depend on the welfare system, on the government. The supporters of all these politicians are developers. And what do they build? They build low-income housing. So if you have more people depending on the system, then obviously they're going to build more buildings. The money continues to go around. So the shift happened when I decided to start to expose. And there was a few others. They've passed away, now. But there was like 4 of us that said, no, we're going to speak out about what the Democrat leadership is really doing, because it's not Democrats. You're absolutely right. It's the current Democratic leadership. And when we would try to explain to people, well, look, this is what they're doing, the gang violence, they're allowing our kids to keep killing each other. Nobody wanted to believe it. And I would just tell people, why don't you go volunteer on their campaigns? Why don't you go volunteer and work in their office? Help them out, get close to them, and then you'll see it for yourselves. So it took years. It took about 8-9 years for people to start to wake up. And when I ran as a Democrat against Tony Cardenas for Congress, that's when the red flag went up. Like, okay, wait a minute. What's going on here? Here you have the guy who helped build this political machine that's now in power, who's now challenging what I call the head of the snake, Tony Cardenas. Everybody calls him that. They know that's what he is. But it raised a red flag and people became more aware. Now, people didn't jump ship. So what happened was the Democratic leadership started to lose the first and second generation Chicanos that were supporting them, which was pretty much their base. The Catholic base, which is a big part of their base, that was still supporting them because they didn't know all the issues that were out there. Because most people in the 29th district, especially in the area I grew up with, it's not that people don't care about politics. It's that people are trying to make a living. They're trying to put food on the table.
They also don't believe that people could be that evil. They just don't think that people. Even today, you can go and talk to just random people about the issues that are happening, and that the recent bill that Newsom was signing about taking away more parental rights, being able to, affirm children and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, there's no way.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
True.
And yet you're just like, wait, clearly you live in a bubble. And maybe you're just going to catch wind when all rolls downhill.
So do you think 25 years ago you had more people that went to church that voted than you do now? Because I know when I ran for office, it was very hard for people. We could not get people. We heard so many people that were religious that went to church on Sundays.
What was their excuse?
They just didn't vote, and the churches wouldn't talk about it. Churches wouldn't talk about how economically, because what people don't realize is the churches suffered. So the churches started losing money when the government started going dry. So it used to be the government gave money to churches to feed the poor or the indigent or the homeless or whatever. Yeah, they used to get funding. Now the churches aren't getting funding. I heard it from, I believe it was the bishop, or I heard it through David. So I can't remember. It's been a couple of years. But one of the things was that the churches were losing that funding.
But there's a reason why. That was part of the strategy going back 25, 30 years ago. That was before the 25-year plan.
So that is something that was going on.
That was part of the plan where it's called the box. We call it the spin. I taught them very well on how to spin every message, but to use it for positive, not for negative. Now they use the spin to create a lie, repeat it over and over. So, for example, you have 10 candidates that are running. You don't want 10 candidates talking about 10 different issues. If they're all your party, they're part of your slate. You want to pick 4 or 5 items that they're going to talk about and stay in the box and repeat it over and over. People start to believe it. Well, what did they start telling the churches? Separation of church and state. They started putting that out there, making it more public. They started doing it in the public schools. Everywhere you went, you started hearing more about, well, the churches can't get involved in politics. And unfortunately, you have a lot of pastors, great pastors. They know the Word of God well, but they don't know their laws. They're not very familiar with exactly what they can or cannot do as a church. So they're intimidated by it because they don't want to lose their 501c3. So what shifted? What shifted in this election? Let's go back to the Dodgers. Remember when the Dodgers were going to honor the perpetual nuns at Dodger Stadium? So we knew.
I remember.
I had Rabbi Barkley come and speak on that Friday night on the Sabbath.
It was quite a rally, actually. I remember that.
Yeah, there was
They said
thousands.
There was a couple hundred people, and there were actually thousands.
Thousands. They say 7,000. I say there was probably a little more than 10,000 because there were people spread out throughout all over.
It was a huge parking lot.
Oh,
there were a lot of people there, so it was hard to really see.
Well, we had 2 parking lots, but you also had people in front of the stadium and spread out throughout the different lots because people had signs, and that was the men of Army that were there.
So they made that announcement. The Dodgers, when they first got a little bit of pushback on that, they said, you know what, we're not gonna invite them. They disinvited them, right?
Yes,
initially,
they did.
And then they re-invited them.
UTLA got involved. The unions got involved, and that's when the union said, they pretty much forced their hand.
So UTLA got in to push
to push to that they be
Dodgers?
honored because that's the agenda they're pushing.
Ah.
Yeah, so that's what happened. So so we decided to get all three. Let's say, okay, this is the opportunity. This is where as being a person, a spiritual person, trying to have that conversation with God and hear His voice. It was like this is an opportunity for us to get the message. I heard was get all three faiths together. What three faiths was he talking about? Catholics, Christians, and the Jewish communities. He wanted all three to come together under one umbrella, and that's what we were working on. So we said, okay, so this was an opportunity for us to get together with Johnny and Jesse Romero, Rabbi Michael Barkley, and we had Turning Point, we had Jesse from Lexit. You had everybody.
We had a lot of people there.
Man, they had
We had to share. Alex Villanueva came.
Yes,
And
yeah.
LAPD was like, we don't know what to do with him.
Yeah, because they asked me.
Is he safe?
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
say, can we worry about him? And I made a lot of phone calls. A lot of people showed up. I was grateful that they did.
Yeah.
And the thing for me was, it wasn't so much that it was political as much as it was that I was raised Catholic. I don't go to church. I don't really, I'm not involved. But it was the idea that what these individuals represented. You want to be transgender, that's fine. Do your thing. But when you want to dress up as a nun and make fun of Christ on the cross, I'm like, that's just not okay. And even people of other faiths didn't think it was okay.
No, even
yeah.
I remember they had Muslims there. They had the Muslims, the Christians, the Jewish rabbis were coming out, bishops, and that was rather remarkable that they all stepped and said, "Look, what stops the next group from being attacked?"
Exactly, and that's why you said it, because it's an attack on one faith is an attack on all faiths. So that's what we were focused on. So we said no. So something you mentioned, Jeffy, was when we were out there in the stage, you had Jesus on the cross, you had the Virgin Mary up there. And then you have the people who are very hardcore Christians who say, I can't go on that same stage because you have Jesus on the cross and so forth. And I said, look, let's put these differences aside, because even within our own Christian faith, we have different denominations. We don't agree 100%. But what do we all agree upon? We know that God is the ultimate, the creator of man and woman. God is a creator of all things. We agree with that. We know that Jesus is the way, other than the Jewish, belief as well. It's a little bit different, but we all believe in God. I said, so why don't we just focus on that? And you have these banners. You can cover them banners when you go up there, have your people stand up and just, so people can't see it if that's what you want. But if you don't want to go up there and speak, let me know now so I can get other speakers. I say that because I was asked, the Catholics had the program laid out where they had their speakers, and then I had to bring my speakers. And that's why I felt that at that time, Alex Villanueva had a very powerful message as well. And then you had the Gen Z 180 shift that we also brought out that was key for us helping get the message
but we
out.
also had Rabbi Barkley, who
Yes.
is a conservative rabbi out of Westlake, California.
Amazing man. Amazing man.
Actually, I brought him into the fold, and now he's become very much into the fold.
Yes.
And he came up and he spoke about what it meant. He goes, as a Jewish faith and as a rabbi, this is just not okay to do this. It's not appropriate. It's not right. You're desecrating another religious belief, and that's what he stood on. It wasn't that anyone was against people being transgender.
Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
think that when you look at the shift, I think that was on a national stage, because they expected a lot of other baseball fields to accept that. And then there were a few that said, oh, we aren't having any part of that. LA was a leader in that. And I think that had a lot to do with how people started seeing things.
So how did that change the momentum?
Well, because I wanted to ask another question on how that changed the momentum, because hold on, I'll
Jeffy's
be right
gonna
back.
say-
All right, let me stop my brain real fast.
Yes. So, but here's the thing. One of the things I noticed after that rally, when I went back and I started thinking about what changed, and one of it was, I know that we had anti-Semitism going on, but it seemed like within 6 months after that time frame, and I don't think it had to do with Rabbi Barkley being up there, but all of a sudden we started seeing a ton of anti-Semitism, and it started growing quickly, very quickly, and then it just took off. Do you think the anti-Semitism and the separation that we started seeing had anything to do with that shift politically?
It did, but you got to remember that those who are out there protesting, they're paid antagonizers. That's all. They get paid to be out there by the unions, by Soros, by
That's
the
why
rest
I
of
brought
them.
this up, because I wanted to get that answer.
Yeah,
because a lot of people were saying that wasn't true.
It is true.
Okay, but here's the thing I want to know is, because people are going to say, well, how does he know it's true? I know people that said they were paid. So my question is, how do you, as a previous candidate, know that to be?
Well, because when you're pretty much at every single rally, no matter where it's taking place, you see faces.
Right.
And when you start seeing the same faces over and over with the same message, and when you give them a chance
During
to kind of
work
defend,
hours.
During work hours,
These are people
you know,
that
I was.
do these people work?
No,
I'm like, how do these
that
people do
that
this?
is their job. But
Yeah.
see, because going back 15, 16 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, I remember with a union saying that we're going to get bus loads and we're going to move them over to Arizona because they wanted to flip Arizona.
All the way to Arizona.
Arizona. So they were out there.
Wow.
People had jobs. They were providing housing. They were providing training. People are getting involved in the different nonprofit organizations to start to change the message. So their planning is the 15, 16-year plan. It doesn't happen overnight. You know, so when they started that in Arizona, I tried to bring awareness to people. But, you know, once again, sometimes people don't want to
seems
listen.
like they should be like, I don't know. What's the legal definition for a terrorist organization?
Yeah, you know, absolutely.
know.
And I'm hoping with this new administration, with Trump in office, you know, that he'll be able to put his foot down on some of this stuff because a lot of it does have to change, Don. You're right. Yeah. You know, there's two sides.
But there has been a organic change.
Yes.
And I mean, talk to us a little bit. I know the numbers aren't finalized yet. I think in California, December 4th or 5th is like the day that they're going to have a final count on all these elections. But what is different today, or what's different in the numbers that you're seeing today versus the last election cycle? Because you've been in this for a long time. I mean, most Republicans, it seems like they pick up just the Republican vote and none of the Democratic vote.
True.
And they typically get somewhere around 25 to 30%.
True.
To the Democrat who's usually running against them, they get the other 70 to 75%. So what was the numbers looking like this time?
The numbers today are they're amazing because in the 29th congressional district, I'll use my race for example, there's only 55,000 registered Republicans. On average, you got 28 to 32% that come out and vote. That's on a good election, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So
They say you get more on a presidential election.
Well, they say, but I think the last times we checked, it was still like at 23,000 or ran in 2016, 23 to 25,000, you know, when I ran as a Republican. So here you're seeing now, I still ran as a Republican, but now I'm getting 63,000 votes. You know, 63,000 votes is what I got in the 29th congressional. So that means either
and climbing, right?
and climbing.
Are
So
you still getting votes in?
they're still counting.
counting.
They said it won't be certified till December 5th.
Okay, and so the person you ran against,
Luz Rivas, the assemblywoman who we're going to be on top of and keep her accountable.
and what was her vote count?
Right now, she's at 120, like 123.
So here's my question. Hold on a second. Why is
2
it
minutes.
California has the largest number of registered Republicans and we still lose by 40 to 60%?
Well, no, hold on. But it's different this time compared
It
to
is
before.
different this time
because
than
I think he
before.
got way more than even I think Benny actually got more than the amount of registered Republicans that even, and we know that Republicans have kind of lost a little bit of their voting libido.
Well,
So-
we've also lost a few that have gone into the independent realm too.
Exactly, because they're just kind of like, I'm fed up, I give up, and yes, and some people they sometimes feel like, I mean, they've been shamed to death for being a conservative and, you know, God forbid, a Republican. So they're like, maybe I'll be the less shameful.
Well, I mean,
independent.
here's something interesting though, because when I talk to people, they were like, well, you know, Trump. I mean, I know Republicans that didn't want to vote for Trump. I'm like, okay, so you don't like the guy, get it. I mean, like, I'm not 100% in love with Trump. I think there are things that he's doing that are great, and I think there are other things where I'm like, Lord, help us all. And I think people are surprised by that. But I think it's interesting that the numbers were still so high for a state that was so against Trump.
And I think they're even higher. I honestly do.
Okay, we're going to stop at that because we do have someone
We'll
who's
get
going to
into
call
that.
in. Leonard's going to call in when we get back. But I want to come back to that because these are the shifts that we're seeing, and I want to hear more from you about that. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Jeffy Said What with Dawn and our lovely guest Benny on AM 870, The Answer.
What?
Dark.
Mike's
So
live.
we're back and we're live. And I just wanted to say, if you are on Instagram, please go to Jeffy Said What, all one word, and follow us. If you're on YouTube, go to Jeffy Said What, all one word, follow us, because we do put our whole radio show on it, and then we clip it up, and then we do highlights. And we've got great guests that we'd love for you to continue to listen to and follow as well. So that's Jeffy Said What. All right, so let's get back to where we were when we got to a commercial break.
Okay, so
Yes.
where are we at? Talking about the
We were talking about how the numbers shifted, and I had said something that, there were a lot of people in California that were told anti-Trump. Period. We had I know Republicans that didn't want to vote for Trump, and yet the numbers were higher. And you were going to explain that, and we had a hard break. So why were the numbers higher? And then I also had mentioned that we had people that left the Republican Party and became independents.
Even left the entire state.
They left the entire state, but I'm talking about the people that are still here. So, and actually you bring up a good point about that, Don, too, because we had a lot of people, we had a mass exit of 150,000 people a year leaving California. So when you think about the number of Republicans that switched to independents, and you said your numbers were higher, but we had so many candidates that had such higher numbers, even running as Republicans.
Yeah, it's the messaging, because when you talk about President Trump, there's a lot of people, and when I would knock on doors, I said, look, I'm not here to endorse any of the presidential candidates. I don't vote for a person as far as who they are as an individual, what they say. It's all about their policies, their voting record, right? So a lot of the messaging that we had to get out there, people started when you're sharing things with the community for year after year after year. Remember the box we had talked about. Right. Keep sharing the truth. Eventually, people are going to wake up. So the Dodger event was a big beginning to the shift, because it finally opened the door for the three major faiths to come together as one and to work together, because the base of the Democratic Party has been the Catholic Church, a lot of the Catholic members. So
and I think that's something that Benny's been, at least from my perspective and following what Benny has been doing throughout, especially this election cycle, was coming prepared to show truth.
Exactly.
And then, you have a lot of these people that want to show their faces in places of worship. And it's like the stuff you're doing is, demonic in nature,
Yeah, but
and then yet you're here telling people, and they don't even want to believe it. They're there in support of the candidate that ran against you. They're and then they're sitting there like, wait a minute, is this true? Right? I think
the lowriders. So my opponent, I don't want to share her name again, loose, but
but I will anyway.
Yeah, so she's related to somebody they had said who's one of the presidents of a big, lowrider club, whatever. So we happened to go out to a picnic. They had a little barbecue. I got invited because, my brothers are the ones that started a lot of the lowrider movements back when they had their 64s, back in 64 to 68 to the 70s. So they're all connected. So we got invited to this barbecue, and I started passing out some of my flyers. And on my flyers, I had my opponent, Luz Rivas' voting record, how she's pushed AB 665, AB 1955.
You brought the report card?
I brought her report card.
He brought receipts.
Absolutely. And as I'm handing it out to people, because they know me or know my brothers, they know the Bernal name. We've always been very well known and respected in the community. So they're like, hey, man, is this real, homies? And I'm like, bro, check it out. Look at it yourself. So like, no, this is BS. We can't be supporting this.
So let me ask you. So you're in the lowrider community. You're at this picnic, and you're handing out her voter record. Are these people that have always been someone that's voted a Democratic ticket still thinking back 25 years ago? So these people don't believe that things really have changed that much, and now you're saying, hey, this is your voting record, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that. So why do you think these people in 25 years have not realized that there's been this significant change?
Well, that was strategically done. That was part of the plan for the unions in the Democratic Party. Make it impossible for either parent to stay home. So how do you do that? You raise the cost of living to a point where neither parent can stay home anymore. Now both parents have to work. And once both parents are out of the house, then who controls the children?
Right,
the
the
schools.
schools.
So parents were so busy because what I started to notice when you mentioned, Don, my brothers and I for the past 40 years in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, we use sports, baseball and softball, soccer to keep boys and girls out of gangs, away from drugs, right? We have a 98% success rate. We don't charge them anything. We train them at the highest levels. They compete in front of D1, D2 schools. Then they go on and they get a free ride. They go on to get a free ride into a higher community, whatever it is, so on and so forth. Yeah. But this political machine, what this political machine has been doing over the years, has been slowly trying to take away these fields away from these kids. So they want to build. What do they want the fields for? To develop low income housing. But I noticed that we'd go to these games, and when we first started, you'd have the bleachers were filled. I mean, just filled with parents. And then as the years started trickling down, let's go back like maybe 16 years ago, we started to see a decline. So I started asking, why are parents not showing up? Why is your parent not here? Why is your mom not here? Why isn't your dad not here? Oh, because they have to work. So I started hearing that more and more.
So what do you think changed it? The parents had to start working, that you had to have 2 parent incomes?
Well, because the cost of living. It's all the policies that these politicians were building. They're
Okay, so that's what I'm
Exactly.
getting at, because
Yes.
people want to know why the cost of living has gone up.
Yes.
Inflation. And when you ask people what their thoughts are, why do you think we have inflation? I've asked a lot of people,
Yeah.
why do you think we have inflation? Oh, I don't know. Well, I don't. It's the Republicans, and I'm like, you can't blame a specific people about it. You have to take responsibility as a voter about who you're voting for and what they stand for.
Absolutely.
And what I've noticed is, it used to be when I was growing up that I saw politicians, they'd say, oh, I'm going to do A, B, and C, and they'd get in there and they'd do X, Y, Z, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not what they campaigned on. What I see now is,
Well,
they
it's challenging up there. Not
that
everybody
I'm going to
agrees.
do
Right.
A, B, and C. And these people don't either hear them, don't pay attention to them, or don't believe them. And these people come in and they do exactly A, B, and C.
Well,
You
that's
know what
Trump.
I mean?
That look at Trump. Trump said, and that's what that would be my conversation when I was speaking to a lot of my Democratic friends. They'd be like, Benny, well, Biden. I say, okay, let's go back to Obama. Obama said he's going to do A, B, C, D. What did he do? Not one of them. But Trump said he's going to do A, B, C, and D. What did he do? He did all 4 of them. Now, had they left him alone, he'd accomplish a lot of his goals.
But wait a minute. What I'm talking about is, you have elected officials right now that are in office.
Yes.
And one I ran against was Lindsay Horvath. She came in and said she was absolutely for the trans community. And then she came down and she was in Sylmar or San Fernando to the library with an event, and she got really upset when a lot of people showed up and said, we don't want this in San Fernando. We don't want pickles reading these obscene books to our children that are 5 years old. And she was
Absolutely.
really upset about it. That's what I'm talking about, is you have politicians now in the last, I've been in politics for 4 or 5 years. In the last 4 or 5 years, I'm hearing politicians state that are saying, I'm going to do A, B, and C. They're getting in office and they're doing it.
It's because they
City
have
Council is a perfect example. LA
Yeah,
County, LA
yeah.
City Council.
they have a bank of votes, and that's where we need this current administration to help us out in California to come out here, because I do have some ideas
on hold, Jeffy.
of where this is happening, but I don't want to say it over the air because I don't want to show my jab, before I throw my right hand. But
Well,
if
let's hold the jab. Do you want? How do we get Leonard in here?
So
he
our engineers
somebody has some experience with your good friend Carden.
Yeah. So here's the thing: we don't
Or
typically
ex-friend.
take call-ins. This is not something that we do on our show.
Mm-hmm.
But we have someone who happens to know the individual you brought up earlier. His name is Leonard. So if we could have,
And he used to run. He runs businesses out in the valley. So
Yeah.
I'm curious myself to know.
So
Sounds familiar.
if our Ryan is our engineer. So Ryan, if you want to go ahead
Leonard
and put
should be
Leonard through,
online.
that'd be great. Leonard, are you there?
I think I am.
Oh, he is. Okay, it all worked. Thank you so much to our engineer Ryan for getting him on. So Leonard, you happen to have some experience with, who's the individual that you have experience?
Oh, well, there's a few, but let me start. When Benny was talking about Tony Cardenas as a congressman, I took a dozen recyclers. I ran a big recycling company out in Sun Valley, and they were being abused by the program, the CRV program, the Bottleville. And so I took a dozen people in to see Tony, and he was sitting on Assembly Natural Resources at the time. That means that's the policy committee. That's the committee that oversees the program. And they aired their grievances. And after the meeting was over, Tony took me aside, and he said to me, "Do you know any Republicans? This is more their kind of thing." And I was floored. Now, let me carry on, because years later, I'm not running that company anymore. I'm advising recyclers. I took a dozen recyclers in to see Gerardo Guzman, who's he related to, who was the district director for Boca Negra. And Boca Negra at the time was the majority leader. And he could have waved a magic wand and fixed things. He could have insisted on an audit. Nothing happened, and then he got sucked up in the Me Too movement, and he resigned. I had also, at the same time, taken 6 Latino recyclers in to see Cristina Garcia. She was the chair of Natural Resources in the Assembly. Her district was down in Downey, and these are people from her district. Same way with Boca Negra, and they never did anything either. And then she got swept up in the Me Too movement because she was playing spin the bottle with her staff, and she lost her chairmanship. These are not quality people that are working for the Latinos in that area.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you touched on Boca Negra, because that was the first grassroots campaign that we ran against them, and we ran it under the radar, and that was we pushed Patty Lopez against him, and Patty Lopez was a Democrat. He had $850,000 in the bank. He was going to be the speaker, and we had maybe 30,000, but we had an army of grassroots people, and we were able to defeat them. And sometimes these people, their arrogance gets to the point where they believe they're untouchable, and that's what happened with him. Now, you mentioned Tony, and let me see if you remember this project. I believe it was across from Arminta. There was a big empty lot that they wanted to transform into like a for Supercross, right? I don't know. Were you familiar with that project? It's right across. It's right there on. Is it Strathern and Tahunga?
No, but let me say one thing.
Okay.
It wasn't until I got involved with David and heard you talk about how you worked for the legislator, and he told you, we don't want to help these people.
Yeah.
So solving
turned the light
problems
on for me.
is counterintuitive in their book. Really putting out the fire, solving the
It
problem.
stops the flow of money. It's what it's all about. It's a revolving door. Because remember, when we talked about these 5 issues, when they questioned me on, they said, Benny, if we resolve these issues you're talking about, the gang violence, teenage dropout, teen pregnancy, so on and so forth, they're like, then what issues will our candidates run on the next time they run for office? And number 2, do you realize how much money through nonprofit organizations comes into our city and in our states?
But how is it that, so, I mean, I hear everything you're saying and what you're talking about, but how is it that the voters now are aware that they chose to change their vote?
We went to the churches. We literally knocked within probably 8 months on about 58,000 doors with our team, with a team of about 7 or 8 of us. We were out there every day. My wife and I would hit a minimum of 400 doors a day. We made sure that we got to meet people face to face. And when we would give them the literature, we had organizations, I can't mention them right now, that gave me information that was showing graphic material that was being taught in the classrooms at elementary. So we had a clear plastic sleeve. We had our campaign literature in there. But the first thing they saw was them disgusting graphic cartoon kind of booklets, right? So they look at me when I give it to them, they like throw it back at me like, I'm offended. Why would you give this to me? And I'm like, well, I'm glad you're offended. But you shouldn't be upset with me. You should be upset with the schools, because this is what's being taught in your elementary schools. And they'd be like, their jaws would just drop.
So people really had no idea.
Had no idea. Even though we have it on social media, even though we were able to get leave our kids alone, get them out other media.
But this was just a shift in your area.
No.
So that's what I wanted to get to. So,
yes.
So you guys did this in your area, but how did it shift all of California? I mean, California turned almost completely red. Technically we would be purple, I guess.
It went from Saticoy It went from Saticoy, went to Glendale, went to Temecula, and started to spread out. But through the Gen Z podcast that we had created for that purpose was to get the message out as well. The message was able to go out to 7 different countries. In those postings, when we first started the Gen Z...
counties?
Countries, 7 countries. So the message was getting out through social media. Luis Santana was the one that was in charge of getting all the message out. And the guy did an amazing job. In our first postings with the Gen Z, you're talking over 3 million views in about 3.5, 4 days. That was big. We were unknown, but it was the issues. And why do I say it was successful? Because it wasn't our idea. When you're obedient to the word of God, when you hear the word of God, you hear him speak, then you know, hey, this is what needs to happen. You're obedient to it, and he'll open doors. And look what we're faced with now. People are awake. They're finally awake.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
definitely. There's definitely a sense, especially the younger population. You would think that Gen Zers are not interested in politics, but guess what? They actually were this time around. And the issues that many people would think they would not be interested in, like the issues of abortion. You would think, this is a done conversation. They're not, but actually finding out, and Jeffrey, when you had ran for office, you found out that this was something that people were actually passionate about, that they cared about. Many people don't realize, that this whole abortion issue, many people throughout the country were like, they're trying. Trump's going to take away our autonomy, our rights, our to do with our body. But it's like, well, hold on one second. They have
People still think that, and I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't know how you think that. I mean,
but they definitely are steering everyone through fear.
right.
But remember, what the enemy intends for evil, God will turn for good. And here's what happened on the issue. Through the Catholic churches, when we were able to speak to the Catholic churches, and God literally brought the leaders to me. These are the leaders of the Catholic Church, not just in California, but in Arizona and other parts of the nation. And the message that I never forget, it said the attack on our children went from the womb to the classroom. So they realized when we allowed the precedent to happen within the womb, what's next? And I go back to when was it the marriage initiative?
Yeah, we were actually talking about this. I was like, isn't it interesting how, here we are talking about like what you could do with your kid inside the woman's body, the womb, and then we used to worry about the child in the womb. Now we have to worry about them when they're born, when they're in school. Right. When they're in school, when you think that this is the place that you drop them off at, they're going to be safe. They're going to be taught math, English, and science. Hold on, not the case, right? And then he pops up with that phrase within a millisecond. From the womb to the
classroom.
Classroom, right?
Yeah, and that resonated with a lot of people of faith because they're like, you're absolutely right. It's
But
just
how did this get all the way across the state? Is what I'm saying. We were acutely aware of it here, and I know we had.
But we had people that were coming from up north. Mm-hmm. I mean, the mothers for
the conventions. The conventions, we spread the message.
So that's what I'm trying to get you guys to go to, because I'm trying not to lead you down the road. But we had so here's what I'm getting at is that we took our local issues and we had people like Jennifer.
Take it to them.
We had Jennifer, our legal eagle, who we just saw her in the hallway. We haven't seen her in months because she's
amazing.
Busy fighting the fight. She's the one that does the intro on my show, and we haven't seen her in months because she hasn't been around because she was semi-retired as a lawyer raising her children. She got heavily involved in it when she saw what was happening in the school with her kids.
It affects all her kids.
And she took her own money, and she has gone to Sacramento at least 25 times in the last 3 years to fight for bills and to fight for children's rights and parental rights. And not the rights for children against parents, but for the rights for parents to work with their children and decide what schools can and can't teach them.
Exactly.
And so this is the point that I was trying to get you to get to, is that it got through California because people finally took the initiative to go to Sacramento, and from there it spread out.
Well, see, but here's what happens at the conventions, and this is what I want to change. That's why I'm hoping that we change the leadership. Going to a convention...
Or what convention are you talking about?
Or the Republican conventions.
Okay.
So when we go to the Republican conventions, you're there to work.
Yeah.
You're there to meet with people, to talk about issues, to move an agenda forward. And what I will see a lot of times is people just get partying after. It's like, okay, guys, this is not why we're here.
I've never seen a party.
We were invited.
Man, there's like levels to this.
It's because you have to network. And what I saw during the last 2 years, because of everything that was going on, instead of people having parties, they would rent a room and they would have a podcast in the room, and they would bring you in and interview you. So I would give I'd give my story to one podcast, then to another podcast, and everybody's just moving around sharing the information because the media wasn't going to do it for us. Mm-hmm. So it's up to us to take the message to the people. And you got to be very strategic on what the messages you want. My honest belief is what happens in Los Angeles happens in California, happens throughout the entire nation, then spreads out through the world. So I've always believed that. Even I was always told that when I was part of the leadership in the Democratic Party and the unions. That's why they focus on New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. If you can flip those three, if you can change any policies there and be successful with that, it'll spread like a cancer. So right now, our focus has got to be LA County. We've got to be able to continue. The fire is lit. People are on fire. People thought the election was over after 2 days. No, I said there's still counting ballots. I go, the good thing is that we've tripled the amount of votes in a very dark blue district. I got 3 times the amount of any other Republican. So what does that mean? That we were talking about that before the break. Mm-hmm. Either 100% plus Republicans came out and vote for me. Not going to happen. So there was Democrats. It was independents. Now, my message has never been and never will be about flipping people in their party because I know great people who are independents, Democrats, and Republicans. My thing is know who you're voting for and why. That's all I'm asking of you. And I go back to the initiative when we're going to have the marriage between a man and a woman. We were talking about from the womb to the classroom, right? Mm-hmm. When I started talking about that, I heard the voice of God say, go to the churches and wake them up and warn them. This is not about them being recognized. This is about a precedent being set in court. So that way, once that precedent is set, then what's next? I can marry my daughter, my son, my dog.
Did that pass in California?
Yes. Well, it passed to protect it, to stop it, and then the courts overruled it. Remember that?
No, I know, but we just had one on the ballot right now, didn't we? In this past election.
Yeah, but I'm going back to what the message was back in 2008. Right. And the whole thing was when I went to the churches, I literally met with hundreds of pastors and Catholic leaders, and I pretty much got kicked out of the meeting because of what I said. I said, this is just a precedent. The precedent is next now you can't stop me from marrying my daughter, my son, my dog, whatever I want to marry. And people thought I was crazy. Well, what are you experiencing now? Is it happening now? Are people trying to push these issues? Have they gone to an extreme? Exactly. The abortion issue was another precedent. Hey, if they can take away the value of a life there, then what about the classroom? Now they think they have all authority and rights over our children, and they try to use the same language over and over and over. But that did not connect with people of faith. So the people of faith finally realized under COVID, when people saw what was being taught in the schools, when I talk about COVID, people ask me, why do you think the districts mandated the vaccines in the school districts? In my honest opinion, this is just my opinion based on my 35, 40 years in politics, is that there was always a group of individuals that fought these so extreme policies, the indoctrinating of our children in schools, right? Mm-hmm. They're people of faith. So if you do a mandate that is against people's religious freedoms, those hardcore people who are the ones that are out there fighting against you, they're the ones that are not going to be vaccinated like myself, and we're gone. And as soon as that happened, boom, they pushed and they just blew up the indoctrinating in our schools. I mean, do you see the timeline? Yeah. That's how they do it. So, but once again, what the enemy intends for evil, God turned it for good because that's what woke up the parents, and that's what's making a difference. Now, even the Democratic Party right now, there is such a battle. I have friends right now, they brought in another strategist to the Democratic Party. This guy was kind of set aside, but now he's back in. So they're going to double down, triple down against us.
Even up to the election, Governor Newsom kind of he didn't sign every single extreme progressive bill.
Does he have another term, or is he terming out?
I think they're going to try to recall him.
No, but but I mean, how many more terms does he have before he's termed out?
Well, I know that he's very interested in running for president. So I think he is.
Clearly, between him and the governor of New York, that was one of the things.
Is he done in 26?
That's what I'm asking. Yeah. Is how many terms does he have?
I believe this is done. I think this is his last one, and I think that's why he's looking to run for president.
So the question then is, did he not sign some of these bills because he knows that it's going to be a problem? But here's the thing I'm going to say.
They're seeing the shift.
I think it was going to hurt all races Democrat, period. And I think he wanted to show that, you know what, maybe we want to scale back a little bit on some of these.
No, you know what the problem is? When he went to the Democratic convention, he stood on the floor and they wouldn't let him speak. They had our assistant governor speak. And here's the thing. I think the Democratic Party does not want Gavin Newsom because of the nightmare that we've had in California. San Francisco will never be the same. San Francisco is one of the unheard of, unspoken seven wonders of the world that no one wants to go to. No, I'm seriously. Nobody wants to go to San Francisco. San Francisco was a tourist attraction worldwide
It's beautiful from a distance.
Yeah, well, it is now. Now it's not even beautiful from a distance. It's empty. And I think that Gavin Newsom did so much change. And he chased out so much business and so many millionaires and billionaires out of the state. I think the Democratic Party doesn't want him to be their next leader. And so I think the Democratic Party is going to have to figure out who they're going to put forward. I don't think it's going to be him. But I think it's interesting everything you brought in to why the change took place.
Why don't you give us a little bit of predictions here?
He's only got a second.
You know the name Alex Padilla.
You think he's going to be the next governor?
No. I think either governor, but I think more of they're trying to prepare him to run for president.
Oh, he is he in Congress right now?
He's a senator.
Yeah. He's a national senator.
Yeah, so they're pushing him. There's a lot of words about him. I know they were talking about.
Are we going to have you back to talk about a little bit of his skeletons?
Absolutely.
In his closet?
Oh, he's got some, let me tell you. They all do.
Well,
they all do.
We're already up through this hour.
30
it's the fastest
seconds.
hour in town. We got 30 seconds. So if you're not following us, please go to Jeffy Said What, all one word, on Instagram, Jeffy Said What on TikTok, Jeffy Said What on YouTube. And as Dawn mentioned before, make sure it's Jeffy Said What, all one word, because you're going to get a different one on YouTube that's not me.
Foul language and cartoons.
All right, what did Jeffy say? Jeffy said,
what? And you're listening to AM 870 The Answer. We'll talk to you next week. It's going to be a 2-hour special because we have Warriors in Need. We will be at Button Willow Track. I will be on a motorcycle learning to race on a track. My leathers have come in, and we've got some veterans coming in from around the country that are going to come in and share that time with us. So please make sure you come in and listen in next Saturday for 2 hours on the Jeffy Said What on AM 870 The Answer. Next coming up is the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club, and thank you for giving up your hour next week.
We forgave, and I won't forget.